My big suggestion to students, particularly through high school, is
You can do anything.
Choose it for you, not for
It
them.
is worth it. Just focus on the next
Doesn't
step.
matter what you're doing.
Don't be afraid.
As long as you're doing
That
something.
is such good advice.
I don't think I could see myself doing
It's a
anything else.
challenging life.
Student nights, Wednesday to
Oh,
Saturday.
I worked on that house.
I racked up every single dollar of debt that I
I
possibly
think there's
could.
a lot of pressure on high school.
Yeah, I
kids
just
these days,
love
right?
working outside.
And if money is something that you care a lot
In
about,
hindsight, that
I've
was,
also been a very indecisive
But you
person.
keep looking for roads that have been less
it
travelled.
was just that moment that I knew what I wanted to do. So nothing else is going to change that.
Welcome to the guest speaker.
Let's do this because I'm really looking forward to this. So last summer, I wandered into my local surf shop looking for the best sunscreen for the long, hot days ahead. Having grown up in the 80s, surfing every chance I could and travelling the world chasing waves, I never paid much attention to peeling skin or sunburn. These days, I'm a little more conscious about what I put on my skin, and like so many others, I'm conscious about where it is made, what goes into it, and how environmentally friendly it is. The bottle I chose was Soul Goods, and I happen to have one here, and it was personally delivered by our guest not so long ago. So if you're watching, that's what we're talking about. As it seemed to tick all the boxes, when I got home, I was surprised to discover it was made just over the hill from me in Kuatunu in the Coromandel. That discovery led me to today's guest. Steph Wood is the founder of Soul Goods, a proudly New Zealand-made company creating natural sunscreens and skincare products designed to protect people and the planet. It was born from a problem she encountered while surfing on the coast of Central America. Unable to find a sunscreen that was reef-safe, mineral-based, and tough enough for the long days in the ocean, she returned home and decided to make her own. So the journey of making homemade zinc in her kitchen for families and friends, which has grown into one of New Zealand's most exciting natural skincare brands. In 2026, Soul Goods Everyday Mineral Sunscreen SPF 50 was recognised nationally at the Viva Beauty Awards, earning runner-up for the best SPF and runner-up for the People's Choice Award. And we'll probably chat about those awards during the podcast. A remarkable achievement for a business that began in a small Coromandel town. But this episode isn't really about sunscreen. It's about recognising a problem, believing you can solve it, and having the courage to build something from the ground up. There is no coincidence that Steph went through is exactly what every business person does. They see a problem, and with that, it's a business opportunity. It's also a story that will resonate with many young people who feel school isn't necessarily where they shine. Steph's pathway was not linear. She worked as a pharmacy assistant, explored house design, became a makeup artist, travelled extensively, embraced the surf lifestyle, and along the way met her partner, meaning a move to New Zealand, and coincidentally means she is our first Australian guest. Looking back, those experiences weren't random at all. Each one added new knowledge, skills, and confidence that eventually came together to create the business she leads today. One of the biggest messages from today's conversation is that business isn't a single subject you study or one lesson you master. Building a successful company demands creativity, design thinking, marketing, finance, legal knowledge, manufacturing, trade partnerships, sales, and the willingness to take calculated risks. This episode is for aspiring entrepreneurs, creative problem solvers, and students wondering whether there is a pathway driven by their ideas and a mind for business and sales. And before we get started, Steve, thank you for coming back with us. And I just want to mention, I mentioned the partner you moved to New Zealand for, which was Luke, a previous podcast, which is Luke's Kitchen. And I know you're up for the Cuisine Good Food Awards on the 24th. So I wish you all the best for that. Today's really about business, and a lot of kids at a lot of schools, they do business classes and they even have to invent products and they can even go into competitions. And for them, this is going to be fascinating because they didn't put risk into it. They might invest a few dollars, but for you, this was quite a personal thing and quite a risky thing to do. Before we get into that, can I take you back to school and your experiences in education, how you found it, where you thrived and where you didn't?
Sure. I grew up in Western Australia, about 3 hours inland from the city. My parents actually lived on a farm. My dad worked on a farm. So, I was a little country kid that went to school with, I think primary school, we had 59 kids in our school. Yeah, so that's where we started. We eventually moved out of that country school to where there was a high school, which I did year 8 and 9. And then from there, we moved to the city life into year 10, which was a bit of a culture shock for me, being this little country kid suddenly going to a school with lots of kids and just different dynamics, I guess you could say. So I completed year 10 and I really disliked school. I really didn't want to be there. And yeah, my parents said to me if I could get an apprenticeship or a traineeship, I was 15 at the time, then they would allow me to leave school. So that's what I did. Got out.
And already there's kids sitting in a room, if they're listening to this, going, oh my God, she's me, but not necessarily. What was it about school? I mean, some kids get picked on, some kids aren't academic, some people, their relationship with their teachers isn't great. What was the reasoning behind school just being a bit blah for you?
I think probably most of it was the social aspect. I did have like a group of friends. I wasn't the super picked on kid, but I definitely was far from the popular kid. And I think just the dynamics of finding your place, like I sort of settled with some friends, but I was quite a shy kid. I've always been quite shy, to be honest. So to, I sort of picked a friendship group and then they weren't really my people, but I was too afraid to maybe branch out for that and try and find where I actually fitted in. So I think from the social point of view was huge, but also I guess I was quite far behind because, I came from a school where, there was always kind of bullies and stuff, but it really wasn't a big thing. Like we all kind of did play together and we all played soccer on the fields. And then suddenly I've gone to this school where there is those social dynamics and, it was a lot more advanced. There was more makeup and boys and things were just so different. And I think I was just probably a little behind the times, I guess you could say. So I found it difficult to find my place.
And we've had a few people like you who have had that experience at school for whatever reason. And to me, it's a parenting issue because each time we had a surfboard shaper, New Zealand's only first female surfboard shaper, and she had her parents said, if you get something, you can go. And I think there is some advice in that. If school isn't working, I mean, some kids stay and all they do is get in more and more trouble and develop bad habits like being lazy, wagging, and not engaging, which is a really bad habit to get into because that can transfer into your work. So your parents were supportive? Yeah, is that they were quite happy?
My parents were 100% supportive. They didn't go to university. My mum was a stay-at-home mum with there was 4 girls. My dad worked extremely hard. He didn't own a farm, but he worked on it. So they had come from, you know, not necessarily an educational background. So for their point of view was you can learn so much in a workplace. I'm not going to let you just leave and bum around, but if you can get some kind of traineeship where it gets you some kind of certification or something that you can build on, they were happy for me to do that because they could obviously see how unhappy I was as well. So yeah, I guess I had conditions that I had to meet, but they were very open about practical learning and learning in the job. It's like, and that's not for everyone either. Some people thrive at university and that's their jam, but there's two sides.
I've got another question I'm coming to, but I want to actually, while I remember, you're a parent now. Do you see that experience transferring with your kids and maybe some of the reports coming home and you going, oh, or is it influenced that?
I think the way they do the reporting these days is so different. Like it used to be A's and B's and F's, and now it's like, I don't know. I feel like everything's nurtured in schools to be equal. We have a girl and a boy. They're very different personalities. So yeah, our kids know a lot about life and animals and all the things I think that we hold value to. They might not be algebra, like mathematicians, but I no matter what, I guess I would support, in what direction they would take. They're still probably a bit young to tell yet.
Yeah. So can I out that because shortly there's quite a number of steps with you. What was that first step like into your first work experience and your first I suppose, training on the job experience? What was it? How did it go? Yeah.
Yeah, so I got a job in pharmacy at 15. I mean, what 15-year-old really knows exactly what they want to do, really? For me, it was just, I just needed to get out of school. I probably looked it up probably then in the local paper. Um, Applied for it because it was a traineeship, so it met my parents' conditions, and yeah, I ended up getting that position. And it was pretty scary to start with. Like suddenly you're out of school and you're with the adults. So yeah, it was a pretty big. It was also yeah, it was a pretty big transition, but pretty early on, like I started to thrive and I sort of loved my work surroundings. I sort of left my school friends behind, like as in we lost connection, and I met new friends working in this pharmacy that were, not that much older than me that I just found were my people. And yeah, I just kind of thrived working, earning money.
Yeah. So what did you learn in that first job, do you think now in hindsight? I mean, I'm going to suggest, and it's probably not right, you weren't exactly making the drugs out the back, which might have helped with the sunscreen manufacture. But were there things you'd learned that now you think, well, actually, that was gold?
Oh, 100%. Like you still learnt not necessarily how to make the drugs, but you learn what certain drugs do, certain things that conflict with each other. Like I guess there was a side of, pharmacies, there is like a skincare side. There was, like a drug side, if someone comes in for cold and flu tablets, what they can and what they can't have. So yeah, I think there was definitely a level of learning from that kind of clinical aspect, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just going to throw a whole lot at you, and I hope I've got this right. You've eventually gone from pharmacy where you learnt lessons, as we just discussed, but there was
Mm.
house design, there was makeup artist, and eventually into sort of architectural design. So
Mm.
can you piece that part of your life together and maybe reflections on what you felt at each step you were learning? Because I'm thinking ultimately this was a wonderful apprenticeship of numerous jobs that gets you to a point you were capable of starting a business. It probably wasn't in your head at the time,
Yeah.
but that's the way I'm seeing it. Can you just piece those three jobs or careers and how you found them, how long you spent, etc.?
Yeah, so I think I was working full time in the pharmacy 2 to 3 years. And in that time, I worked behind the counter as an assistant. I also worked in the photography part. So I guess they gave me lots of opportunities to sort of see what areas I liked. I worked in dispensary for a while, like dispensing scripts, which a pharmacist would then check over. And then I also got to spend time in the sort of makeup beauty area. I've never really been like a full-on beauty person, but I loved makeup, and I think it stemmed from the creativity around makeup. Like, to me, it was, like, almost like a form of art, and I've always been drawn as a super creative person, so that took my interests, and I was, like, getting a little bit bored with pharmacy, so I started to do a makeup diploma, while working still at the pharmacy, I think, like, just part-time, to afford, but then doing that full-time diploma. So I did that, which I actually really enjoyed. Like I did some theatrical makeup again because I think it was that creative side rather than necessarily the beauty side. I did though do some wedding makeup and ended up working for a makeup company called Napoleon Purtis, which was again started out good, but then I soon realized it probably wasn't for me because of the beauty aspect that came with it. So I kind of, yeah, stemmed away from that and then started looking for my next adventure. I've always been interested in interior design, but I think I didn't have the qualifications to get into interior design, or if I wanted to get into it, I had to, go tick off the qualifications. Obviously, from leaving school, that came with those consequences. Um, I think it was going to cost me take 4 or 5 years, and in my head, I was probably about 19. I didn't think I had that time. So then I found this course that was a diploma in building design and technology. And even though that was mainly drafting, it definitely had the creative side of architectural design. So I thought, yeah, I can do that. 3 years is achievable. So I I registered in that and started that journey, which was actually really challenging for me because it was a lot more technical than I really, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to design a house, but the technical side that came with drafting and making sure all those working plans work for a build on site was, yeah, it was challenging. I definitely have never really been the exceller in a class. I just kind of sit in the middle, sort of going unnoticed, but like I was always a person who had to work hard to get to where I wanted to be, but I also have my determination to get there is huge. I just maybe didn't always have the smartness, I guess you could say, if that's even a word. Yeah, so I did my 3-year diploma and I was lucky enough to apply for a position with a company called Paramount Design, which does one-off designs. Everything's based per project. And that was a junior position that went through our TAFE, and I was lucky as the candidate to receive that job. So within a week of finishing my diploma, I started a new job, which I must have been about 21, I think, by then. Yeah, so I started with this company and then I worked for them for 5 years, and then I got awesome design opportunities doing that, like designing houses, because they really took me under their wing and, gave me those opportunities being like a small company. And then, yeah, I moved to New Zealand at 26 to be with Luke, and I still was able to work for that company from New Zealand for another 2 years before I gave it away.
Okay, so my first question is, my first statement is that draftsman technical drawing side you said was challenging. And I'm thinking that probably stretched you, though, a lot of what you knew, well, eventually you were going to get into with your own company. That there's a lot to learn. You've got to learn real quick. You've got to read contracts. So in fact, that must have been a highly beneficial experience. If you hadn't stretched yourself then, you might not have had the capabilities later. Would I be right in saying that?
Oh, 100%. And honestly, I think also coming down to backing yourself, realizing that you may be not as dumb or as silly as you think, and realizing that, other people do see potential in you. Otherwise, you would not have, I would not have got that experience, that job. So, if someone else is backing you, then you also have to back yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you also learn skills like when I look, do you'd be involved in the design of this sort of stuff? I don't imagine you're just farming that out to someone else. Are you quite involved in design and colors and all of that stuff in your product?
Yeah, I actually have done everything. The
Oh,
logos, the design, the packaging, our website. That's kind of my jam. That's what I'm most interested in. So I am very self-taught. When I was doing the drafting design, I learnt like Photoshop because there was a part of like rendering houses. So that kind of gave me an opportunity when it came to all our packaging design that I could use Photoshop. Um, but I'm mainly self-taught. I love learning, so I am actually still currently doing a graphic design course just online in my spare time, and that's taught me to use the other softwares like Illustrator and, it's teaching me the technical terms of creativity because I feel like I can be a creative person, but I don't know the technical terms like a graphic designer would know and why they would implement those things. So that's my little side hustle at the moment, which is good because everything I'm learning, I can then apply back to Seoul when I'm further doing our packaging and so on.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, wicked. Before I get into it, what was your experience with sunscreen as a young person? So I reflected in my introduction about me growing up in the 80s and the peeling nose. I would have been known as the kid with the peeling nose at school. And then we got zinc, and it was all colored zinc, beautiful pink stuff we could put on. And then it was more of a fashion statement, and we were a surfer. And then I remember going to Hawaii and getting completely parched and burnt, and all my skin was falling off. Like, it was an awful time, really. What was your experience? Did it have any influence, or was it just vaguely unassociated at your young life?
No, I don't think sunscreen. So I do remember would spend a couple of weeks a year away down where my parents moved to down in Mandurah. We would go to the beach for 2 weeks. That would be our holiday, and we'd just go to the beach, every day and go boogie boarding and just be in the sun. And I always remember my parents, putting sunscreen on me. But I don't know if mineral sunscreen was a thing back then. I definitely know my parents slapped me in chemical sunscreen because that's probably all they knew. Um, I don't know. Yeah. So from the sunscreen point of view, no. But I was also quite the black sheep, I think, in our family. Like I was always quite health conscious. Um, Always ask the questions like why some that is particularly needed. And yes, I guess I always had it in. I swayed more to like my parents used to call me hippie, but I was more natural inclined and like I don't know. I just feel like I asked questions that some people just take for granted, I guess.
Yeah. What a hippie living in the Coromandel. Who would have
Yes,
thought?
they weren't surprised when I said I was moving to New Zealand.
Yeah. Can you explain, because we're going to get into this and how you started your business, but I think it's timely, the two types of choices people have with sunscreen and that idea that, I'm going to say there's two choices. Can you explain those two choices? And if there's more than that, go for it. Just so people understand what they're doing when they're buying something and maybe what your philosophy is behind why when you suddenly decided, I'm going to do something different, because there would have been a reason for that. Yeah, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so there is two main types of sunscreen that are sold in the market. So there is the mineral sunscreen, which is what Soul Goods is, which means the only active ingredient is zinc oxide. So there's zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. And they're known as a UV filter, which is called a physical blocker. So that means when you put the sunscreen on, it sits on top of your skin. It doesn't soak in. The sun rays come down and it creates a barrier. So the UV pings off. And then there's chemical UV filters, which are chemical use sunscreens. So they actually absorb the UV rays. It gets conducted as heat and then apparently dispersed from the body. So those particular sunscreens absorb into your skin. Yeah. So for me, in the way I naturally feel, I'm like, if you can get a zinc sunscreen that's natural, in my personal opinion, better for you. I see that as a better option. Usually the trade-offs is uh, mineral sunscreens are known for their white, chalky, ghostly effect, whereas a chemical sunscreen usually is like a lot thinner. It's easier to spread in, so people like the feel of that, which has always been probably, I reckon, a big reason why people choose chemical sunscreen over mineral sunscreen. But I also feel like mineral sunscreens come a long way, and that's a bit of a thing of the past. And yeah, I feel like there's a lot of emerging data, which, in my opinion, gives much reason not to use chemical sunscreens and to go a more natural option.
Because what I think you're hinting at is it's no different than me rubbing Voltaren on. It's there to run into my blood supply and actually soak into me, which some people become concerned about because they're not really sure what they're rubbing on, what the chemical is, what it's doing inside them, and how far it goes. Would that be correct in what?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is studies that have shown like chemical UV filters have been absorbed into the bloodstream. So they've found a particular UV filter that they have found that has been in the blood. Obviously, your skin is your biggest organ, right? Like, and if you're spreading a chemical on it, then you're going to absorb it. Not necessarily saying that you're going to have really bad effects from that, but over time, if you're putting on that one sunscreen every day for 180 days of the year, you got to start to think, at what stage, like, is it not healthy to be absorbing this much? It's also been found in mother's milk as well. Like they've done studies where the UV filters themselves are in the mother's milk, which they then give their infants. Again, not necessarily saying that that's going to, harm the child, but you got to start asking questions as to, is that good to be in there for them to drink?
So can we go back? I mentioned South America. You're off surfing with your partner Luke,
Yeah.
and you have this epiphany, but there has to be this time where, for some strange reason, you buy a whole lot of stuff and you start mixing it up. So yeah, well, what was the thought? What was the thought process? It might not have even been a business. And how did you go about going, I'm just going to make my own?
Yeah, so we used to use this really awesome zinc, like the old school cricket zinc, out of Indonesia. It was awesome, but we returned back to, it was natural and effective. You never got burnt. So for me, it was like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you use it? But when we returned to New Zealand, we couldn't get it from Indo to here. And then, so we sort of started thinking, oh, like, find something here. And I realized I couldn't find a natural zinc here. And then Luke being entrepreneurial himself, we just sort of started talking, oh, it'd be cool to make our own. He has cooking skills. I've sort of got a bit of a pharmaceutical, knowledge. So I just based it off this Indonesian one as a starting point to sort of see what they were doing, and then created our own. Tested it on our friends, started wearing it, loved it, got it into a few local, businesses that supported me. It was very organic and pretty underground, to be honest. And then it kind of grew from there. Yeah.
And you're literally at that point mixing it up, creating X amount, shoveling it into your own.
It literally looks like a drug lab. Like, zinc oxide comes in a powder form, and zinc oxide as a powder form is not good to inhale. So like it was full, like mask with this big bag of white powder. And it would have been quite funny for some people walking into a kitchen. But it was very organic in the kitchen, yes. Yeah.
So can you tell me the processes you went through to get to, because you mentioned white chalky, that it can be a bit not great, but you've gone to the point where the stuff in here, you don't even know you've got it. So how far did you have to go through that, and what did you have to do to it to improve it to the point where you were satisfied?
So we handmade the zinc product. That was our original product that, it's mine, a lab. Eventually we started getting it made in a lab, and the lab doesn't own our formula, it's ours. When we started to think, zinc is such a niche thing, not everyone wants to wear zinc, not everyone wants to see it visible, but sunscreen is, everyone needs sunscreen. So that was kind of the turning point really for the business to then start formulating a sunscreen. And that went way beyond my chemistry capabilities so I ended up engaging with the lab and basically telling the lab what I don't want to see in a sunscreen, what I didn't like, but what I wanted to achieve and what I did like. And to the credit of someone who really does it as a job, it was all basically based with the lab. So the lab would send us samples, we would tell them what we like, what we don't like, and then we would just keep moving until we found something that we're happy with.
What does that, because there could be someone sitting on an idea here listening to this podcast going, well, I've actually got an idea in mind, and it's a makeup, it's a something. How do you find a lab? How much do you pay for these constant here? Because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be thousands of dollars each time they concoct something here. Can you tell me about that?
It's different. It's probably reaching out to many labs because different labs have different ends. So some labs are more, sure, if you want us to formulate something completely from the ground up, then they will usually tell you it will be X amount, and then you get 3 samples. And then if you want to formulate from there, it's going to be X amount. But there's also labs, there's different ways. There's also other labs that have base products. So they might have like a base sunscreen that they've already sort of formulated to a certain degree, and then you can come along and sprinkle your fairy dust in there and like maybe put some things that you would like, and then so that probably cuts down the cost a lot because you're not starting really from scratch, you're sort of coming in mediocre, which is what we originally did to start, because it meant that we could come into the market with reasonable minimum order quantities and minimalish startup costs.
What would you need as startup costs? Like if someone, again, what did you have to invest 10K, 20K? Like what, just to even think, because you have no idea whether you're going to sell any of these at this point in time. Really.
So when I was just doing my zinc, in the kitchen, I think it was so minimal, like, because I could make small amounts. I think I'd make a batch of like 100 at a time. So I'd literally buy like 100 little tins, and I'd buy the raw ingredients that I needed. So, maybe it was like $500, maybe, maybe $1,000. When I started thinking about doing the sunscreen stuff, that was probably a little bit different. So I bootstrapped. I didn't borrow any money from a bank, but I basically borrowed $30,000 from Luke's kitchen. And that was probably my starting point. So yeah, I invested 30K, and that was to get my packaging, to get my stock, to, get my samples through the lab and get that sort of going. I think I can't quite remember. I think then the minimum order quantities were about 1,000 units. Yeah, it was six. This is our sixth summer of seriously doing it as a business. So yeah.
And what do you have to do to ensure when you make a claim? Because it says stuff on here, mine's SPF 40, not 50. It's 2 hours resistant in water, all of these sorts of things. What did you have to do to make sure you didn't make false claims? And
Yeah, so we have to get our sunscreen tested. So you have to do the 10 subject test, which is what most sunscreens go through. It is conducted on humans. So the testing lab takes the samples, they conduct the testing, and that's basically how they get your SPF factor that you're allowed to claim. And also you can be put through to do the water resistance. That is quite a costly process. It's about 10 grand each time you have to do the testing, and the Therapeutic Goods Administration, so the TGA in Australia, usually recommends to do that every 3 to 5 years just to make sure things haven't changed and the formula's still performing and you're hitting your SPF goals. Um, it is quite a controversial thing at the moment. I really think they're looking into the way they do the testing. There's been a lot of brands under scrutiny and things happening. Yeah, and my personal opinion is that it comes down to a lot to do with the way the testing is conducted. And I know that they're looking into different ways to improve that. So, yeah.
are they literally rubbing it onto people and seeing
Yeah,
if they
so
work?
basically, I think people can be paid to be the volunteer subject test. So basically, how you get your SPF factor is the amount of time you can spend in the sun. So if I was, say, a human subject test and with no sunscreen on, I started burning in 10 minutes, then they would apply, under their UV lights, they must intensify it. And then, so I started burning in 10 minutes, and then they put the sunscreen on. Technically, I should be able to, if I lasted 3 times longer than that 10 minutes before I started burning, then I would be an SPF 30. If I lasted 5 times longer, I'd be an SPF 50. So that's sort of how they do the measurements. But also it can be so conflicting because if you're European and I don't know, you have a redhead with freckles who burns really easy, and then you have a tanned Brazilian that, their skin's so different. I also think it can come down to medications, what you're taking. I think it can come down to the amount of antioxidants you've got in your body, the food you eat. I think there's so many different factors that can go into a human skin, and I think that's what gives vast testing results, but that's just my opinion.
I would
Yeah.
echo that. I think too, obviously those are the standards and hopefully they're changing, but how, when you were coming up and you continue to maintain your standards, what did those
Mm.
look like when you were creating it? Because it's all well and good to have to adhere to what the industry requires, but what are yours?
So when we were doing certain testings, if we formulated something, then you can send off for a 3 human subject test. So basically you would pay a much smaller amount, and then that subject test would give you your initial findings, and then you'd know if you're on track. So you could be like, okay, if those 3 findings came back at an SPF, whatever it is, then you would be comfortable continuing on with the formulation, or having to realize, full disclosure, our SPF 40 product that Blair has used to be an SPF 50. When we got all our things retested, it actually was between SPF 40 and SPF 50. So we decided from a legal point of view to cover ourselves and put it in as an SPF 40, not because I feel like it doesn't, I know it works 100%. And yeah, when it comes to sun protection faction, it actually, there's so much scientific stuff that also goes with it. An SPF 40 and SPF 50, there really isn't that much different except for your marketing, to be honest. Yeah, it's complicated, but yeah. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but
No, it does. And it's also interesting, like as a consumer, I would rather you, who I know is a family person, you're putting it on your kids, you're giving it to your friends, and like you just said, you 100% know it works, versus the bigger companies where there's a CEO who changes every couple of years, right? Like and I'm not discrediting the big companies, but being a entrepreneur with a small business that you have founded, like your reputation and the fact that you stand behind it is such a huge part. And I think that's something that the students and even parents listening can maybe also learn from, is like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, your name is so closely tied with the product. And so that makes you very proud of it, but probably more careful because it is your name and your reputation. What are your thoughts?
yeah, I definitely think it's also your level of values. Like you said, if I happily put this on my own kid's skin, then I'd happily put it on yours. But if I am not gonna touch that and put that on my own kid's skin, then there's no way I'm ever gonna promote that as a product. So, yeah, maybe that's the hippie coming out of me, but I don't know. I also feel like sticking to your values because things change, so much. There's so much. I don't want to. It's not scaring consumers, but there is just so much in the SPF world that's been looked at and changed. And I guess I stay across those things that are changing because I have an invested interest. But I feel like a lot of people, they just find a product. It says that it's TGA approved and it's got all these amazing things on there, and then they're like, "Oh, that's cool. I can use that." Um, but there's also a lot of loopholes, and yeah, I guess I'm just sort of advocating for clean sunscreen.
I would suggest that being smaller is an advantage in some respects because not that I could destroy you tomorrow. If that thing didn't work when I was in Indonesia surfing, I'd be telling everyone that this bloody thing didn't work. Because again, as a surfer, it's in my vest, and I'm going to like remote locations, hours and hours in the water. I'm taking that to Sumba in November. It'll be the only thing because it works,
Yeah.
and I think if I complained about a Nivea one, no one would hear, but they would hear if I said something about you. Would that be right?
100%, yeah, definitely. I mean, small town reputations, 100%. I think too, being a smaller brand is you are wearing a lot of the hats. You're still so connected to your business. If you did get burnt wearing a sunscreen that you suggested, then you're probably going to go through to a Teams person that's in customer service that doesn't really have the same passion as you would if you were to email me and say, hey, XYZ or whatever. And I feel like we keep that human aspect, which I think a lot of people crave these days as we live in the AI world.
Can I ask you, because like I said, I'm twisting this really. There's kids sitting there and they're not going to make sunscreen, but they're going to go into the world of business, into sales creation. What else is in behind other than mixing up sunscreen and getting labs to, what did you learn about business you had no idea about? Because there's a lot more to it that you could share with us.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely the basic finances, like understanding, if you're going to be importing things, understanding your importing and exporting costs is a huge one. Understanding GST and tax, I think is definitely huge to educate yourself on because sometimes you feel like you're making money and then suddenly your GST comes along and you haven't really accounted for those things. Also, I think with any sort of product business, working on your fixed costs is very valid, but also your variable costs. So your variable costs are things like, if you're working direct to consumer online, it'd be like your fancy packaging you put and your little thank you note, and all those things can kind of add up and sort of really cut into your margins. So it's been really working out your costings and not and to be fair, I 100% didn't do that at the start. Like, man, I made so many mistakes, like hours and hours fixing packaging because I was so set on not having plastic and doing something different and blah, blah. So it's also, you will learn along the way and you will make mistakes, but I cannot stress enough. If you want to get a leg up when you first start, is get your costings right. Yeah.
How did you approach advertising? How did you Grace and I've done this recently with our podcasters. You've got this wonderful product. How do kids in Gore know you've even got it? So how do you reach out or are you more isolated and going, I'm happy just to make an impact in smaller areas here? What is your approach?
I was super lucky to get a connection through a friend that I reached out to a small branding agency. He was like he sales reps for small brands in New Zealand, and I pitched my sunscreen to him because I'm not a seller. Like, I love creativity, I love all the pretty stuff, but when it came down to nitty gritty selling, I'm just like, to cold call someone would be my worst nightmare. It's just not who I am. If someone approaches me about my sunscreen and wants to know something, I'll talk for days. But if I have to walk into a shop and be like, hey, like, it's a skill that I do not have. It's just not me. So I got on board with his sales agent. So he was already selling mainly into surf stores because he has surfing brands. So he worked for commission for me. So every time he would get it into a shop, I would pay him the commission, which was an amazing way to be able to grow, but also not have to outlay a wage or outlay money I didn't have because I was only paying him when he got me the stores, basically. So that was one way. And then direct to consumers, online, we did pay an agent for a little bit, but it really wasn't working and it blew out our budget. So me being the person I am, love learning, do the hard way, I started doing a meta ads course, and that has been a huge pivotal moment for Soul. Like, what we did in a whole year, I did in 1 month in an October, just from learning to do my own meta advertising and staying connected. Not saying an agency is bad, like, they definitely have their place. But when you are creating and doing it all, basically they taught me how to read the data and make decisions on data, basically, like educated decisions, and saying, no one knows your business better than you do. So if you can cut out the agent and do that yourself, for me, that has been huge for Soul.
Where are you now? If you rewatch this in 5 years' time and you were to take a snapshot of sort of sales, numbers of stores you're in or dispersed, where are you as a business, quantity-wise, statistics-wise right now?
As in what I feel like I'll be in the future, do you mean, sorry, or how do you mean?
No, sort of how many are you in X amount of surf stores? What are your volumes you're selling? So again, I'm presuming in 5 years you'd like to, you might have doubled, but where are you now in your sales?
Yes. So I think we have about 120 active stores currently in New Zealand, mainly surf stores, but we are starting to now go for more like pharmacy or organic market, because I feel like, maybe as a mum, I'd walk into pharmacy to try and find a sunscreen, as opposed to like a surf store. I guess the surf store was our kind of lifestyle, so naturally that kind of is engrossed into the brand, but also because of my sales agent being in that sort of realm, it kind of, I guess that's where we sort of went with that. We have just got into the Australian market, so we just signed on an Australian distributor, which is very early days, but we're hoping that we just launched in early August, so I don't know how much they've sold yet, but I hope shit tons. Sorry, language. So we want to try and grow internationally because New Zealand has such a small minority summer, so it's really hard. It's very intense from, say, September to January, and then it's like, cricket. So so working internationally, Australia is a big thing. Our minimum order quantities for like our everyday sunscreen now is 5,000 units, so we've doubled down on that this year, because we did run out last year, so we want to double is the goal. We also have other things in the lines. Like, I've been, a passionate parent. I feel like schools only have access to chemical sunscreen, and we are in the process of beginning a campaign to get mineral sunscreen subsidized into schools as well.
No, you're absolutely right. Before I forget, you mentioned earlier values and environment because you've factored that in. What are those factors and what are you trying to achieve there?
I always remember when Luke and I were traveling, being in the water all the time, the amount of rubbish and just so much plastic that you see. So disposable. And I feel like in New Zealand, we're a little bit guarded from that because, we have beautiful beaches that we walk along, but there's so much plastic pollution. And I know it's a huge worldwide problem. And, I feel like a lot of people's mentality is, it's just one sunscreen tube. It's just, this and that. But you and 8 billion other people are sort of saying that. So I have a strong passion to keep our packaging as minimal and low waste to the environment as possible. It's challenging. Yeah, it's really challenging. But yeah, low waste, just low waste, and basically, and if we do have to look at that as a packaging, because it's really hard to, with sunscreen, you have to make sure it's safe and make sure that there's a good barrier, so it's not, you don't want your product failing because of the packaging you're choosing. So it's challenging, and we do have to dance with the devil a little bit, but I think the end game is to be better, and I feel like if you lead from the front as a brand that can be better, then hopefully those people that buy from you see your vision and try to be better too.
Yeah. Now, I may be giving away a wonderful advertising technique, but I would have thought one of your advantages, it's like farming in New Zealand. We have one of the worst suns in the world because of the ozone, etc. Is that something you can leverage overseas? Like it's sort of like, well, if it works here, well, it's going to work over there. Is that something?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Like everyone knows New Zealand and Australia has some of the highest melanoma skincare rates, and yeah, the UV's bad. So yeah, you can. It's a saturated world, like there is still a lot of great products out there, and definitely in the meta advertising when you're trying to get your voice and your product in front of, say, people in Australia, it's a lot more competitive than here. So it's very tactical. It's trying things, realizing that doesn't work, so much testing until you find that winning ad, to be honest. So yeah, it's interesting. It's not I mean, some people probably do, but we've definitely grown sustainably. So we haven't had that one crack at moment where a famous person has used it and then you're just blowing off the charts. We've been slugging away for a long time now. But in some ways, I feel like, that's okay too, because then you iron out those little things that don't work, and then you improve your packaging or you improve your formula, and, you're ironing out all those things and you're keeping up with your demands. You're not running out of your product. So you're just growing sustainably. Yeah.
Well, there, Grace and I were thinking we were the famous people, but there you go. Um, in terms of the being a business person, you're also a mum, you're a wife, your husband's got a business, doing well. How do you manage it? Because it is going to be really, really difficult. And I think some people would be interested in whether they even try. How do you manage it and how stressful is it?
Well, stupidly, we both chose summer-led businesses. So in summer, it's extremely stressful. Um, well, not extremely stressful. I mean, yeah, there was definitely points where it's pretty full on. I don't know, but I kind of thrive on that, to be honest. We try to put things in process, like when I pick up the kids from school and I take them to do the after school activities, and then we come home, like I try to disconnect from my phone and you know, eh, and try to disengage and not check my emails, and like try and engage with the kids, and and then put them to bed, and then there might be an hour's work that I need to catch up on to be able to get a head start the next day. I'm not really a person that turns on and watches Netflix. I'm a person that opens up something to learn, So I guess our personality is, I don't know, it's almost addictive, chasing that entrepreneurial feeling. And Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work and it's not easy, especially Luke, where it's a lot of hours in summer, but I also feel like it's worth it. And then on the flip side, in winter, generally we can take a big step back and like we got to travel with our kids, for 2 winters for 6 months in a caravan. Which most people don't get to do in their lifetime if they're working 9 to 5. So, it has some good perks too.
Yeah. Can I just ask before I ask something else, how did you diversify? Because you sell more than sunscreen now. Is that something also you're factoring into your future?
Yes. So, as I said, sunscreen New Zealand is quite, yeah, it has a short lifespan. So, like trying to look at building our range to try and make it a little bit more sustainable through the winter months. Yeah, and just like again, trying to focus on multi-use products, not needing 100 things in your bathroom cabinet that you're just going to throw away. Yeah, so it's really still trying to stick to our values, but sort of bring out things that I think that people would benefit from.
And where can they find you if they are suddenly they listen to this and there's the mum there and they're going, well, I'm going to buy my kids some of that. Where would they find it if they haven't got a local surf shop?
Yeah, so you can go onto our website, Solgoods, solgoods.co.nz. We have our full stockers page on there, so you can look in your region on a map to see if there's something close by. Otherwise, we are available online as well.
And can I ask, would you, on reflection back at school, did you ever think you'd be where you are today doing the things you're doing? And in fact, if someone had asked you and said, Steph, choose your career, might that have actually been slightly destructive for someone like you who was always going to wiggle their way through life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, no way did I think I would be here. But I just got bored easy. So I just knew that I just had to keep trying. Like I feel like a lot of people get fixated on having their one career, but for me, that was just not an option. I just get bored too easy. So I think it's okay to swap and change and keep going until you find something that you like. Like, don't be afraid to change it up because you only get one life, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I want to, thank you for giving the time out of your busy parent schedule, business schedule to chat with us. And obviously, you always confess to bias, but being a surfer and being exposed to sun constantly, I think it's something, particularly in my area, that it's really important to us. And I know that's globally when I travel with people from around the world too, and it's always a topic of conversation. So I think you're onto something really special, and particularly that ethics around it and the ability for it to actually work. It's golden to me. Like it doesn't run in my eyes as the other one. We didn't like. There's
Yeah.
nothing worse than when I put, and next minute I can't see. So next minute, and it can be
I
quite
know.
dangerous in the surf we're in. So look, there's
Yes,
a lot more to it. There's a lot more to it. But yeah, look, congratulations on what you're doing, and please send our regards to Luke in terms of the Good Food Awards, and best of luck for that. And we'll hopefully be seeing you in a few weeks with our friend Caleb to catch up a little bit and meet you in person.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
I'm gonna say it was better the second time round. That's what I'm gonna tell.
This is so much better. I'm like, I should tell every podcast that. Just lose the first footage.
Just lose the first one.
Way
I think
more
you-
relaxed second time round.
Tell the audience what happened, Grace.
So yes, now that we're at the end of the episode, I will say clearly you can tell Steph lives a life where she's rolling with the punches, because I completely lost our first podcast interview we did months ago, and she was extremely gracious and practical. Like, all right, yeah, when can we meet next? And I think that's a testament to the person you are and some of those soft skills. It's like, yeah, things happen. Let's move on. I was so grateful for that. So thank you, Steph. The final question that we ask everyone is, if you could go back to yourself, maybe like we often ask people when they're in those last few years of school. So for you, that was before deciding to go into the pharmacy. What advice would you give Steph to Steph?
It's like Steph back then.
Yeah.
Is I'd probably say you've got time, so don't put so much pressure on yourself. You got
Yeah.
your whole life ahead of you. But you really think you don't when you're that age. Hey, you think but gosh, if I could go back and relive,
Yeah.